Now we'll talk about the components of an ERP system. What are the different parts that make an ERP system? Like any system, the basic components are, of course, hardware and software. So hardware and software, any system, any information system must be hosted on a particular machine. And then you have to have the software itself. And the software consists of several parts. You have an operating system, like for example Windows, or if it is a network operating system. You have a database, and you have an application, the logic, which has the business process. So the server is the hardware. Usually ERP systems, you will hear about two servers: an application server, a server that hosts the logic of the business processes, and you also hear about a database server. If the company is very large, there may be multiple application servers and multiple database servers. But a server is a large machine that hosts the application and another that hosts the database. Why do these machines have to be servers? Well, they have to be connected to the network because people will access. People, whether they are clients or suppliers or employees, will access these servers, the application, as well as pull out information from the database servers through the internet. So these servers must be, because there are multiple users, they have to be large machines that allow multi-user access, which means that multiple users at the same time can access the application or can access the database. Okay, so the server is the hardware. We have at least two machines, two large servers, the application server and the database server. On each machine, we have to have an operating system, which is the software. We have a database software, database management system. We have the application, which embed the logic behind the business processes. So every company will have its own processes, but I also have processes within the system. What is a business process? A business process is a set of steps that a company or the employees within the company will have to go through in order to reach a certain objective or perform a certain transaction. So if we are talking, as we said, about selling to customers, a customer places an order. That's the first step. We reserve inventory, we package, we ship, we charge the customer. All of these are one business process, and that's selling. So a set of steps that a company will have to go through or conduct in order to achieve a certain objective. Now, there are several people who interact with an ERP system. We have, of course, the clients, like placing an order, and the suppliers. And these are like, they check the system in order to find out when to replenish, when to send you a new set of inventory. And we also, of course, have the employees who use the system on a day-to-day basis. Now, you will see, as we said, now, one question that I want to ask you is, why do we have these different servers? I told you about an application server and a database server. Why don't we put the two together? Why do we have these two separate servers? So the components of an enterprise system, they come together to form what we call an architecture. An architecture is a design. Another word for it is a blueprint. So a blueprint or a design of an actual ERP system is what we call an architecture. So the architecture will tell you the components and how the components fit together and integrate or coordinate together in order to achieve the objective of the system. So when we talk about an ERP architecture, we talk about the hardware, the software, the business processes, the people, and the database all coming together in order to support the daily business processes within the organization. Now, when you are about to implement the system, it's very important that you look at the architecture. You look at each individual layer because, of course, the architecture of your ERP system will affect the cost, will affect the maintenance, and how the system will be used. Remember what I told you about the hardware, for example. We said usually you have two servers, one for the application, one for the database. And I asked you the question, why don't we combine these two together? Now, combining or leaving them separate will influence the cost, will influence the maintenance, because now if I change something in the database, will that affect the application? Do I have, if I change a little bit of the application, do I have to shut down the database? So the maintenance, if I upgrade something in the application, do I have to make also change to the database and how the system will be used? So all of these, of course, parts of the architecture are integrated. They depend on each other, and they support each other. Of course, the software is hosted on the hardware. The database support the application, because if the application requires some information, it pulls it from the database. So the parts definitely support each other. When you are designing the ERP system or coming up with the architecture, designing the architecture, it's very important that you take future needs into consideration, that the architecture be flexible, which means it allow for growth. And another word for growth is scalability. Scalable means it can allow for increase in the number of users, for example, or increase in the number of transactions that you do daily. Transactions will increase maybe because of you going into a new market. Now you're selling to China. So you need to adopt an architecture that is flexible, that allow for change and allow for growth. Okay, here is another view of the architecture of an ERP system. Now, once you decide on the specific software that you want to buy, so if you decide I want to go with an SAP ERP system, the architecture is already defined by the vendor. The vendor really determine what kind of servers you would have, what kind of database would be there. So if you go with Great Plains, which is Microsoft ERP system, you know what kind of operating system will run there, what kind of database will you have. Okay, so the vendor determines the architecture and specify the architecture. This is different from the traditional IT systems, because in the traditional IT system, you actually define your own architecture that best fit your organization. With a prepackaged solution, the architecture is already defined by the vendor. Now, you have, once you choose a vendor, you have to take a close look at the architecture and see what kind of changes do you need to make. So the business processes may not best fit your need. And it is okay to say, I'm going to do a vanilla implementation, which means I'm going to implement the software as is. but you have to take into consideration your future needs. So it's very important that you take a close look at the architecture and see if every single layer and every single component of the architecture best fit your current needs. We have two views of the architecture, the logical architecture and the physical architecture. The logical architecture focus on the needs of the end users, the people who will use the system. So as you can see from the diagram here, the end users require a user interface. That's the front end, which are the screens, the set of screens that they will interact with in order to perform business processes that involve accounting, supply chain, distribution, finance, HR, marketing, or production. Now, these are the different functional areas, and the processes may involve integration of different business areas. Now, in order to be able to conduct these business processes, I need to have a logic that is embedded within the application. The logic should allow for security, should only allow access to those who have rights. So, for example, no one from outside of the organization who is not an employee and is not a supplier and is not a client should have access to the ERP system. Only authorized users should have access to it. So that's what we mean by access. Security, I also cannot give an employee full access to everything within the system because that may cause unethical behavior. Accounting students understand that there has to be segregation of duties. There have to be separation of duties. You don't need to have full access to the system. You only need access to the things that you need in order to perform your daily business processes. Now you have the database, which stores the data for the application, and you have the hardware. The hardware, as we said, hosts both the application and the database. So this is the logical architecture, which are the components that focus on the needs of the end user. The end user require a set of screens that give them access to the different business processes within the system, and these business processes are hosted on a hardware. The hardware hosts the business processes as well as the database. So here are the components. When you look at them, they are focusing on the needs of the end user. The end user, as we said, wants screens that give them access to business processes. The business processes should integrate across the different functional areas. The business logic or the application should allow access only to authorized users. It should also enforce security. They should have database. Now, can the end user directly access either the application or the database? And that's the third question, or the fourth question. Do you think the end user should have access to the application or to the database? Now see here is the physical architecture. The physical architecture now focus on efficiency, on cost, reducing the cost, improving the response time, and so on. So you know that for any ERP system will have like at least 3 layers, like a database layer, an application layer, and the front end or the GUI, the presentation interface layer. So now, physically, for example, the database may be divided into different machines because the huge amount of data that a company may have. So you may dedicate one machine, one database for production, one for reporting, and the disk database is for backup, for making a copy. In case anything happens to any of these databases, then a copy already exists on the disk database. The application logic, again, you have the application server, but you also may have a print server that accepts all the printing jobs, put them in a queue, decide the order of which will be printed first. You have to have load balancing to balance the different loads of the different tasks that you have. A batch server is a server that runs jobs maybe at night or at the end of a month, like for example HR, the payroll, jobs of running the payroll, how much, the amount of money that you need to transfer or deposit in every employee account will run at the end of the month, at the end of each month, after, for example, deductions have been taken away and so on. The front end, you have the application, this is the presentation layer, and again, you may have you have to have like a web server so that people are able to access the application through the web. Again, you have load balancing, you have integration servers, you have remote user client server, because people may want to access the application, yes, through the web, but sometimes they have a VPN connection, which is a virtual private network connection, and so on. So these are the exact machines that you need at every layer. So here we're talking about the actual machines when we're talking about the physical architecture. And why, for example, would we need 2 or 3 databases? Well, we need the backup because anything may happen and you don't want disruption to the operation. So as soon as one database is down, then the backup can take over right away. So for, again, improvement for the efficiency purposes and for the response rate, for example, in order to improve the response rate, which is the amount of time it takes for the machine to perform a specific action, you may have to divide the database among different machines. Why would we have a print server? Of course, like to do the printing and the batch. So all of these depend, the actual machines that you will have at each layer depend on the organizational needs, the load that you have within the organization, and the efficiency, the level of efficiency that you need. Now, one technology that is closely related to ERP is e-business, or conducting business over the internet. And a lot of people thought that these two, one will cancel the other, that if we are doing business over the internet, then we may not need ERP. But actually, a close look at the two shows that they are two different things. What we are seeing today is that ERP is including e-business as one of its services, but e-business and ERP, as they evolved, are two different things. We know that ERP is focused on integrating the different functional silos of an organization, integrating the finance, accounting, marketing, HR, like the different functional areas within the organization to support business processes. A business focus was on connecting a business with its external partners, with its suppliers, with its customers, and we see that ERP have added this feature. So supply chain management is now part of the ERP. Customer relationship management is part of the ERP. So originally, e-business was how can I buy things over the internet? How can I sell things, of course, over the internet? How do I do business, consumer or business to consumer, B2C kind of business, or business to business? But then we now see that this has been engulfed by ERP system. I'm going to go from the first and then the last. If we look, ERP system was focused on creating that central database that allow data sharing, allow the flow of information from across the different functional areas dynamically and immediately in real time, so that you can again speed up the business process. It's about integrating, system integration, integrating the different modules together, and supporting the sharing of information. It's about changing the business process to the better, because as we said, the ERP has its own logic embedded based on best practices. It's about improving decision making because you have access to data from all over the organization. That's the focus of the ERP. Now, the focus of e-business originally was on communication, communicating with customers, communicating with suppliers, communicating with your employees, collaboration, being able to access your calendar anywhere you are, supporting groups so that they can make decisions, better decisions, without having, even if the group is dispersed across different functional areas and so on. And of course, e-commerce. So again, we see that ERP has included a lot of the features that were originally introduced by e-business, but now we see, for example, that group support is part of ERP. Communication, a lot of the things can be done, or like alerts can be sent to specific individuals, and the system can set to send an email if a certain step or a certain alert is being fired within the system. Now, e-business was really a disruptive technology, and by disruptive technology we mean it changed the total the way we do business. It transformed the way we do business, how we buy, how we sell, how we do provide customer service, how we establish relationship with our suppliers. Before e-business, we never heard about an online auction. We never heard about customers selling to other customers like we do on eBay. We never had people selling to businesses, individuals like you and me. We didn't hear about social sharing ability, for example, to like help others through the internet. We hear a lot about things being done over the internet, like fundraising and things like that. So in that sense, e-business is a disruptive technology, whereas ERP is really an adaptive technology. It's not a total change. We already had the business processes. We just embedded in different systems, and now we brought them all under one system in order to allow for integration across the organization, integration of all efforts from the different functional areas within an organization. So you can see that the two are different. They are not exactly the same, but what you need to know is that ERP had actually included a lot of the functionalities of e-business under the services that they provide to their customers. So again, ERP focus on the internal business processes, on integration and improving the efficiency of business transactions, whereas e-business is focusing on connecting with external partners and the external processes. It's more about effectiveness, providing better customer service, being able to have a strong relationship with your suppliers and so on. There is, of course, a lot of commonalities between the two. They both focus on integration. So here in e-business, I'm integrating with external partners. In ERP, I'm integrating internal business processes. I need, of course, to have my business strategy aligning the goals of the ERP with the e-business. So when I told you that a lot of the functionalities within e-business are now part of ERP, now when I connect to the customer, when I connect with the supplier as part of my ERP, how will that affect the internal processes? So there is a lot of